Welcome to episode 349 of the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I'm Ashley Scott Meyers, screenwriter and blogger over at sellingyourscreenplay.com. Today I'm interviewing writer, director, and also actor Sam Macaroni. He just recently did a film called Guest House starring Pauly Shore. We talk about his career breaking into the industry and how he got this film produced. So stay tuned for that interview. If you find this episode valuable, please help me out by giving me a review in iTunes or leaving a comment on YouTube or retweeting the podcast on Twitter or liking or sharing it on Facebook. These social media shares really do help spread word about the podcast, so they're very much appreciated. Any websites or links that I mention in the podcast can be found on my blog in the show notes. I also publish a transcript with every episode in case you'd rather read the show or look at something later on. You can find all the podcast show notes at www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/podcast, and then just look for episode number 349. If you want my free guide, How to Sell a Screenplay in 5 Weeks, you can pick that up by going to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. It's completely free. You just put in your email address and I'll send you a new lesson once per week for 5 weeks along with a bunch of bonus lessons. I'll teach the whole process of how to sell your screenplay in that guide. I'll teach you how to write a professional logline inquiry letter and how to find agents, managers, and producers who are looking for material. Really is everything you need to know to sell your screenplay. Just go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. So now let's get into the main segment. Today I'm interviewing writer, director, and actor Sam Macaroni. Here is the interview. Welcome, Sam, to the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I really appreciate you coming on the show with me today.
Hey, thanks, man. Thanks for having me.
So to start out, maybe you can tell us a little bit about your background. Where did you grow up and how did you get interested in the entertainment business?
In Yosemite, California, which is basically a national forest park. And it's not a place many people come from to Los Angeles to make movies, but we come from all over. So
sure. And so, how did you get interested? Were you making shorts as a kid? How did you kind of get interested in the business living out there?
I knew when I was 6. It was really weird. I was just obsessed with movies, and at that time, we didn't have cell phones and cameras. So my dad was one of the only people in the neighborhood that had a video camera. I thought it was really cool, and I took it from him, and he never got it back. I made a bunch of short films, like a lot of short films, and moved to LA when I was 18 years old to try to make movies with a trunk full of VHS tapes to try to sell my vision to people. It was interesting.
So let's talk about that transition for a minute. I know I have a lot of listeners that live outside of Los Angeles. Maybe you have a few tips from people that are moving from outside of Los Angeles to Los Angeles. Is there a particular place in LA that you recommend for newcomers? And maybe there's some tips just in terms of getting some income going. Are there some particular jobs or ways of getting jobs that you might recommend?
I mean, there's a couple jobs to do in Los Angeles when you're a screenwriter or an actor, because obviously I was trying to do that as well. And, it's restaurant, which isn't doing so well right now because of the pandemic. And then, it's extra work. I did a lot of extra work, which was really awesome because I was able to see how they made actual movies and stand next to movie stars and kind of figure out, the hierarchy of a set, because it's a really crazy world and you hear about it. But then when you're actually there, it's different. So I'd say my story from coming to Los Angeles down here, I got a job as an extra on the movie Heat. I was a stunt driver. It was like one of the first movies I was in. And I remember telling my dad, I called him at lunch and I said, I'm here on a movie with Robert De Niro. And my dad said, holy crap. He said, can you get him to sign one of my business cards? And I didn't know anything about who could talk to who, so I went skipping up to Mr. De Niro at the lunch break. He had sectioned himself off about 3 buildings down. He was running his lines, and I remember going up to him, and I think it was in 1994. I remember saying, hey, Mr. De Niro, I'm sorry to bother you. My father wants your autograph. And he cussed me out right there on the street. He said, how did you find me? Yeah, I'm memorizing my effing lines. I mean, he cussed me out good, and I remember calling my dad back about 15 minutes later crying, telling him that town was terrible. But I've since met him, and he's a very nice man, and it was a funny.
Yeah. So take us through this process. Now, you did a bunch of shorts, it sounds like, in high school and later. Did you continue to do shorts once you got to Los Angeles? I noticed on IMDb you have, dozens, if not close to 100 short credits that you've actually written, directed, and produced and acted in.
Yeah, well, I guess that'd be my single greatest piece of advice to anyone coming down here is just pick up a camera and do it. And if you're a screenwriter, just, pick up a piece of paper and a pencil or a typewriter and just write. Because I wrote so many scripts, and they were all terrible. I don't even think I figured it out till 5 years ago. You just have to write and then make it, and write and then make it, and get opinions, and you don't listen to everyone's opinion, but if 5 opinions line up, it's probably something you should consider changing or doing. I did make a lot of shorts. I made probably 15 to 20 short films before I moved down here, and then it's a little different for your listeners because I also direct, so I'm going to try to keep this to the screenwriting, but I did get a short that I had made spotted at a party. It was kind of one of those classic Hollywood stories. Somebody saw a short at a party, and they worked for MCA Universal, and they called and asked me if I wanted to direct music videos, and that's kind of how I got into directing. But it really all came from writing scripts, scripting out these shorts, and shooting them cheaply.
Yeah,
I didn't have any money.
Yeah, for sure. So then let's talk about your latest film. It's now a feature, Guest House, starring Pauly Shore and Billy Zane. And maybe you can kind of dovetail into that. How did these shorts lead you to that, position where now you're directing a feature film?
So I saw about 10 years ago the YouTube pop up, and I saw the ability to make a short and then create it on your own and then publish it on your own. And I just started doing that, and some of them took off and went viral. And I got really lucky, and then I looked carefully to see what shorts were doing well and what shorts weren't. And then I started tailoring my content towards what people liked, and that got me in a position to where I had some interest from some people and to possibly make a feature, which was the whole reason that I was on YouTube, because that wasn't my thing. I just wanted to make features, but you have to get noticed somehow. And so it was 2015. I'm like every screenwriter. I have probably 6 or 7 scripts going at any given moment, and I was right in the middle of my little swirl of scripts. I think I had 7 that year. They were all pretty bad, and I remember I was looking for a house to rent, and I went to this one house, and it was a beautiful house, but in the back there was a guest house, and there was a guy in the guest house, and the realtor said, "Hey, don't go back there." And of course, when somebody tells you that, you're just like, well, why not? So, the realtor took a phone call, and I went and knocked on that door, and I'll never forget what I saw. This just the creepiest guy opened that door up with long.
It was the actual Pauly Shore.
It was, but it wasn't the cute, cuddly Care Bear version. It was like the nasty yellow fingernails, and there was paint on the wall that was peeling. There were cigarette butts everywhere in these little jars of water. I couldn't figure out what the guy was doing. There was Kleenex balled up everywhere, God. And there was the stench of stale cigarette smoke like I'd never ever experienced before. And I remember sitting there with this guy and asking him who he was, and him telling me that he was the owner's friend. And I remember asking him clearly, will you leave if I get this place? To which he countered with, could I stay if you got this place? And it was an interesting, quick conversation. I remember driving away that day, talking to my girlfriend, and I said, "Hey, there's a movie there somewhere." And she's like, "Oh, yeah, if you want to write it, go ahead and write it." And I did, and it ended up being this. And it's crazy because I can remember that day.
Yeah. I think that's actually a great story, just to show how life, leads us sometimes to these stories. So let's talk about the actual writing of it. The credit is yourself as the story by, and then the writing credit. You also share the writing credit with Sean Bishop and Troy Duffy. How did they play into the writing of the script, and what did your collaboration actually look like?
Troy Duffy for 20 years. I think everybody knows him as the guy that wrote Boondock Saints, and then my friend Sean Bishop works for Disney. He'd written some television scripts for DreamWorks. I think he wrote Shrek the Halls television show. So these are guys that I'd written a lot of short films with. I brought Troy in. I did a short film on YouTube called Knight Rider 2016 that I wrote with Troy. I have another one called Empires. It's some Star Wars spoof that I wrote with Sean in 2013 or something. These are videos that we all enjoyed writing with each other. And so I went home and I wrote the treatment for Guest House, and I thought it was funny. And then I wrote the first draft, and my first draft was, I think, 74 pages. A lot of what is in the movie now was in that first draft. Character names are all the same. Situations are pretty close. Some of the gags and pranks at the end are pretty close. But Troy he's always been very good at writing shocking comedy. He's pretty in your face. And Sean, his specialty is heart. Like, he's from the school of Disney and Pixar. He works for John Lasseter, so he understands, the heart. And I think every comedy, even if it's going to be raunchy and crazy, needs to make you happy and sad and miss your mother, all that fun stuff. So I wrote a draft, and then I sat the two guys down and I said, hey, can you punch this up? And that quickly became us meeting every night for, I don't know, probably 6 months. And Sean added the heart, and Troy shocked it up, and it ended up being what it is today. So it was an interesting process, and it worked well. So, somebody's always got to get, I've written with a lot of partners, and if you sit in a room and you just keep talking and talking and talking, sometimes you can talk yourself out of writing anything. So I'm a big believer in just doing that first draft, sticking to a pretty good formula, pretty easy structure formula, and banging it out, and then bringing it to people that have eyes that you trust, and making it better.
Yeah. So how much time on this, taking Guest House as the example, how much time did you spend just kicking around the idea, working on an outline, and then versus actually creating that 74-page first draft? What is sort of the timeline breakdown? Do you spend a lot of time outlining, less time in final draft? Or do you spend a lot of time in final draft and less time outlining?
I spent the majority of the time, I spent a week outlining. I just tried to shove it into Act 1, 2, and 3 and, put a nice beginning, middle, and end. I spent 7 days on the first draft, and it was probably the fastest I've ever written anything, and I think it's because I was just inspired. Sometimes you get that little itch, and for me, I break it down to a numbers game. I say, okay, I got 70 pages, because that's what I wanted to hit first draft. I don't think 100 pages is necessary, because in 75, you can tell if you have something or not, but 50, you don't really know, so I always try to do 75. So it's a numbers game. I tell myself, if I write, it's a challenge. I tell myself if I write 10 pages a day, I'll have it done in 7. If I write 20 pages a day, I'll have it done in 3. It really is a numbers game. And then I lock myself in a room, and I try to just go as fast as I can. In that outline, I outline what every scene is. I do it first. I do 3x5s. I look at them all, and I play with it. And I know what my scenes are, and I'm, just in this scene, Blake gets home. He's just been fired. So I have that much to go on. And then I challenge myself to just come up with anything I can to get through that scene. I try to make the scene 2 pages. If I can just do 2 pages of scene, I can fly. Maybe 3 if it needs it. 1 if I'm doing some silly montage. But you surprise yourself, because if you think too much, I find I'll is the pen red? Is the pen green? What do you have a blue pen? It's like, none of it matters. Because what I finally learned once you shoot the movie is all that changes anyway. It all changes the day you show up to shoot, because of whatever scenarios are happening or whatever your actor brings. So get something down, let it be a blueprint, because it's ultimately going to change on set. And then when I edit it, a lot of it changes and gets restructured. Weird process where if you're too precious about your script, you don't get anything done. So I challenge myself to get it through it as quickly as possible, and then generally I go back and read that, and I don't even remember where some of the ideas come from. I'm going so and I'm like, wow, if I can make myself laugh, it's pretty cool.
Yeah. So on your development process, in this case, you brought in Sean and Troy to help you do the rewrite. Are there other people that you send your script to just to get notes? And were Sean and Troy, were they the ones that the material seems to resonate, so you kind of went and pitched the idea of them doing a rewrite? Is there other people sort of in your circle that you also get notes from?
Yes. It's really important to get notes. So, I've been lucky enough to meet a lot of people down here. I've been in Los Angeles for, I think, 2 decades now. So if you're down here long enough and you manage to actually stay, you should have some people in your circle that actually make movies. And so I've got a lot of friends that are real feature film writers and directors. So I make sure to get at least 5 opinions before I get into my second draft. And, it's a pretty good rule of thumb. If you get notes from 5 people, first thing I do is I never ask for notes. I just say, please read this, because somebody's going to give you notes no matter what. But if you ask for notes, then they look for problems. If you just say, read this, and they give you their opinion, I find that it's more of what I want. I want their opinion. And sometimes I don't agree with people, but if 5 people read something and 5 people are like, hey, your lead is a jerk, then I've got something to look at. So what I'm looking for is overlapping opinions. I'm not really looking for notes. I can't stand notes.
And so what kind of notes, maybe we could have one specific example. What kind of notes did you get on Guest House that you had to go back and make some changes?
Well, my lead sounded like a jerk. he was actually more of a jerk than Pauly Shore's character, Randy, who's living out in the guest house. My lead fought back so hard in my first draft that he came off as somebody that should probably be in jail. And it didn't have a soft enough ending. I think my ending, it just ended, I think, with the house burning down. And it was Sean that came in and said, hey, look, you got to resolve this. You've got this guy out in the guest house. And for your listeners that don't know my plot, a young couple moves into their dream house, and the only stipulation is they have to let this guy stay in the guest house for 3 months. And, of course, he never goes anywhere. And he ruins the house and their relationship and their marriage. So it was Sean that said, hey, we should have a wedding at the end of this.
Huh.
And so I re-engineered the whole ending, and the whole third act is they think they've got Randy out of the house. They think they chased him off because there was a prank war, a turf war in the middle of this movie. And they try to go ahead with their wedding, and Randy shows up and just absolutely makes it. And the couple breaks up, and by now you've watched these people go through hell together, so you now actually care. And, there's a sappy, sad montage where they think they're going off in their separate directions, and then it was Sean who said Randy should give them their house back, and he should have turned the guest house into a nursery because she's pregnant. And that's what we did, and it was a really fun, tender ending where he comes back and he embraces gives them the guest house and hands it over to their family. And it actually, we did a couple test screenings, and there were people crying, and I couldn't believe it. I was looking around, and I was like, oh my gosh, we made somebody cry on this silly little, stoner comedy. So
yeah,
it's an interesting process, but you got to know who's good at what and trust them.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so now you have a script that you guys are happy with. What was the next step to actually getting it into production? You're also a producer, so were you involved in the raising of the money? And maybe you can talk about that just a little bit, how you actually got this from script to screen.
Yeah, I did all of that, and it's a really stressful process. So you get this thing, you have this script, and by the way, the script's never done. I mean, even I started pitching it, I think, in 2017, and I'll get a call from Troy at 2 a.m. Hey, dude, we got to have Randy say this. And it's like, oh, crap. And run back over to his house, and we end up rewriting the whole thing. You keep retuning the script, but at the same time, I'm pitching this thing everywhere. I'm having lunches for other projects, and I'm saying, hey, I got a comedy as well. I have a comedy. And you make a deck, you make a sales presentation. I started the deck as soon as the script was done, and a deck, for anybody that doesn't know what a deck is it's just a sales tool to say what this project is. You generate an synopsis at the front of it and a log line, and then you rip pictures off the internet of things that are similar. So obviously movies that are similar to mine would be Money Pit or Project X. So you put a bunch of photographs from those movies. You put photographs of people moving into houses, anything that shows the look and feel. Then you put a bio section, and that's involved in the project. And then you put a section at the end of that deck that has similar films and how much they cost and how much they made. And obviously you err towards the movies that have made a lot. So you kind of make your little presentation look well. I pitched that deck around for a while. I was doing it. There was a minute where I was going to do the movie with National Lampoon, and that company's all over the place. I've just been purchased by some new owners, and they brought me in. They met with me. I promised I could make the movie for $500,000. They were very close to doing it, and then they just fell out. So then I did what was called a rip reel. A rip reel is where you rip scenes from other movies and you edit your little 3-minute presentation of this is what your movie would look and feel like. It's like a deck, but with moving visuals. So I did the rip reel, took scenes from X, Money Pit. You put a song that you kind of want to show the look and feel of your movie, and then I just kept taking more and more meetings. And it was Troy that said, you have to meet this producer. He would probably make this movie, and Troy took me down to a lunch at the American Film Market in 2018. I met a producer. We sat down, and he said, I'll make this. And I've heard that a million times. So you just say, great, thank you, awesome. And sure enough, he kept calling, and 2 months later he said, I've got a financer set up for this. And then you get into the world of when you have a movie financed, all movies are done on cast contingent. So it's if somebody signs on to star in it, and that is a whole other game in itself. where every celebrity is kind of ranked on how well they sell in different countries. Most producers will say on this guy, and it means, how does he do in England? How does he do overseas? And I went after a couple leads, and we settled on Pauly, and he checked all the boxes. All the producers were happy, and the second he was on board, then some other cast came on board, and it all came together pretty quickly at that point.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. And I want to step back to just in terms of the cast. I mean, you had a great cast for this movie. Billy Zane, obviously you mentioned Pauly Shore, but you had Lou Ferrigno, Bobby Lee, Steve-O, Chris Kattan, all real comedy. Well, I guess Lou Ferrigno's not a comedy guy, but certainly Steve-O, Chris Kattan, Bobby Lee are real comedy heavyweights, I would say. How did you get some of those people involved? And I think the broader question is, I noticed a lot of these actors were in some of the shorts that you had done. It sounds like with Sean and Troy, you had done shorts with them. So maybe just talk about how you met those folks and how you were able to, just relate to them and become friends with them and continue to work with them.
I mean, it comes from making exciting, fun stuff. So Steve-O, I've been best friends with for probably 20-something years. I worked on many projects with him. And
how did you meet him originally?
Let's see. I was at an actor's house. That actor's name is, actually, I've never told this story before. I was at an actor's house named Clifton Collins Jr. He's a great actor. He's a really good friend of mine, and I've done a lot of projects with. I think it was 2002, and Clifton had just done a movie with Val Kilmer, and so Val Kilmer came over to hang out, and he showed up with Steve-O. And I remember I was sitting there, and we just hit it off, and I've been working with him ever since. We've done so many projects together, so much fun stuff. So that's how that happened. Lou, I'd worked with. I made a spoof of the Hulk in 2014, and I just aggressively reached out to his people and just said, I make these YouTube videos that get millions of views, and was lucky enough that his rep actually showed him one of something I'd done or something, and he thought it was funny and showed up to be in the spoof, and became good friends with him. We had a really good time. And I became really good friends with his son, Louis Ferrigno Jr., who is also in the movie. He plays Kip, Sarah's ex-boyfriend. Chris Kattan was a friend of Pauly's, but I'd met Chris several times, but Pauly actually brought him to this project. Billy Zane I've been friends with for, almost a decade. We've worked on a lot of projects together. We actually had a virtual reality company together when I got obsessed with virtual reality. So all these guys are just people I've known for years and are just good friends. And, if you're cool and you've got cool stuff going on, then cool people want to hang out with you, I guess is it.
Yeah, no. And so when you're pitching a guy like Chris Kattan, that's a smaller role in a smaller movie like this, what is in it for him? Obviously, you're not going to pay him an extraordinary large amount of money, but I guess he gets to work with his buddy Pauly Shore. Maybe you can talk about that a little bit. I think a lot of times, especially new directors, new writers, they don't fully understand that these actors, they're just humans like us. And so a lot of times it's not all about the money or this or that. It can have to do with that relationship with another actor involved in the project.
You're absolutely right. It's really not about the money on a small project like this. It really is about, the first thing is the character funny, and can the actor bring something to the character? So for this character, he played a delivery guy. And, I think in the script it had one or two lines. And what attracted him to it was, A, it's a fun time. We've got a fun cast. And B, I'm going to let you improv, and I'm going to let you go nuts because you do you better than I could ever do you. So he came onto it, and he improved all of his scenes. And he was so funny. I mean, we were dying on set. And, for a comedian like him at his level, he just wants to come make people laugh sometimes. I'm sure he could do bigger movies, and he does do bigger movies, but he just had fun that day, and that's what these guys want, is just to come have a good time. And look, we all just want to be making movies. And anybody that's listening to your podcast just wants to make movies. For me, it's the most fun experience of all time. It's really stressful, but there's nothing like sitting around with your buddies, cracking up, doing take after take after take, trying to, make milk come out of each other's nose.
Yeah, no kidding. So I'd just like to wrap up these interviews by asking the guests what they've seen recently. Netflix, Hulu, HBO. Is there something that maybe is a little below the radar that you've seen in the last, month or 6 months or year that you think maybe screenwriters should take a look at?
I'm going to say that it's a really weird time, and I have spent way too much time on Amazon and Netflix. It's all blurred together. I wish I'd been to a theater recently, but I haven't. I will say that it's getting extremely stressful every time I sit down with my girlfriend. The what are we going to watch question is so stressful now. Then we just go down the rabbit hole of Netflix and, Netflix, Amazon, all these same platforms, and it's sickening because you've watched everything at this point. And I went down the rabbit hole of bad Netflix horror films, and they've got so many of them. They're really not horror. They're kind of like Lifetime or Hallmark movies that are supposed to be scary, but they're not. So I don't have any actual recommendations other than just I hope we can get back to the movie theater because that's an experience I missed.
Yeah, I'm with you. How can people see Guest House? Do you know what the release schedule is going to be like?
Yes, this Friday, September 4th, you can get movies, rent movies, Amazon, iTunes, all those great places that I was just talking about. It will eventually go to one of the streamers, but that's not until 6 months from now. In November, the DVD comes out, but the short answer is on Friday. You just open up your TV or your Roku or whatever and type it in, it'll come up.
Perfect. And what's the best way for people to keep up with what you're doing? Twitter, Facebook, a blog, anything you're comfortable sharing, I will round up for the show notes.
The best would be at Sam Macaroni at Instagram or at Sam Macaroni at Twitter. But I have been feeling Instagram more than Twitter lately. So follow me over there if you want to see what I'm up to.
Perfect. Well, Sam, I really appreciate you coming on the show and talking with me this morning. Good luck with this film and good luck on all your future films as well.
Hey, thank you. And I can't wait to listen to this episode and more episodes from you. I really appreciate it.
Hey, perfect. Thank you. We'll talk to you later.
All right. See you. Thanks.
A quick plug for the SYS Screenwriting Analysis Service. It's a really economical way to get a high-quality professional evaluation on your screenplay. When you buy our 3-pack, you get evaluations at just $67 per script for feature films and just $55 for teleplays. All the readers have professional experience reading for studios, production companies, contests, and agencies. You can read a short bio on each reader on our website, and you can pick the reader who you think is the best fit for your script. Turnaround time is usually just a few days, but rarely more than a week. The readers will evaluate your script on 6 key factors: concept, character, structure, marketability, tone, and overall craft, which includes formatting, spelling, and grammar. Every script will get a grade of pass, consider, or recommend, which should help you roughly understand where your script might rank if you were to submit it to a production company or agency. We can provide an analysis on features or television scripts. We also do proofreading without any analysis. We will also look at a treatment or outline and give you the same analysis on it. So if you're looking to vet some of your project ideas, this is a great way to do it. We will also write your logline and synopsis for you. You can add this logline and synopsis writing service to an analysis, or you can simply purchase this service as a standalone product. As a bonus, if your screenplay gets a recommend or a consider from one of our readers, you get to list the screenplay in the SYS Select database, which is a database for producers to find screenplays and a big part of our SYS Select program. Producers are in the database searching for material on a daily basis, so it's another great way to get your material in front of them. As a further bonus, if your script gets a recommend from one of our readers, your screenplay will get included in our monthly Best Of newsletter. Each month we send out a newsletter that highlights the best screenplays that have come through our script analysis service. This is a monthly newsletter that goes out to our list of over 400 producers who are actively looking for material. So again, this is another great way to get your material out there. So if you want a professional evaluation of your screenplay at a very reasonable price, check out www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/consultants. Again, that's sellingyourscreenplay.com/consultants. On the next episode of the podcast, I'm going to be interviewing writer-director Darren Lynn Bossman. He wrote and directed Saw 2 and Saw 3, and also did a movie a couple of years ago called Abattoir, which he talked about right here on the SYS podcast in episode number 154. So if you haven't listened to that episode, do check that out. We talk sort of about his origin story, how he got into the industry and worked his way up. This time, we're just going to talk about his new film, which is called Death of Me. So keep an eye out for that episode next week. Thanks for listening. That's the show. Bye.